first manuscript that we're going to be looking at for content is LJS 102, Zena nagaromu. And this is an Ethiopian manuscript, and it's actually not medieval. This manuscript is from the early 20th century, sometime between 1900 and 1925. And so I'm going to open this up. We have these neat little sort of page markers here that mark where the illuminations are.
Right.
Here.
Those are so interesting to me because they're like these markers of, by the way, here's the most interesting content.
So you don't have to read it if you don't want to. You can just go straight to the pretty
That's
pictures. Right. So this manuscript's Ethiopia. So the reason that this is interesting generally is because it's from Ethiopia. Ethiopia has a really fascinating manuscript tradition that is long-standing. And so I remember the first time I presented this manuscript, it was completely new to me, and I sort of selected it because I thought it looked cool. And I said that it was a forgery. And after my presentation, one of the other curators who knew more than I did was there. And they said, no. They said, that's not a forgery. It's just part of this long tradition. Oh, wow. So people in Ethiopia are still making manuscripts using the same sort of practices that they were using in, the 5th and 6th centuries when they started. And in fact, the illustrations are really notable. Like you can always tell Ethiopic illustration because they have this very particular look to them. But we're going to look at the text here, the writing.
I think the writing is really interesting. One thing that strikes me as you talk about this manuscript and this long tradition is the idea that technologies still exist and coexist together. And thinking about the Star Wars universe, most of what we see are these computer printouts with, whatever script they're using, whatever kind of language. And we once in a while see them sort of in an X-Wing, or when we see the Death Star plans, we get these glimpses of this digital technology that they're using for communication. But then with these manuscripts, we get this sense that there's other technology and that they're still using this writing technology. And that to me is really interesting. And I know that's interesting to you, thinking about how these manuscripts continue up through. And even when I see my students and talk to my students and they sit down with their notebooks and their handwriting, and I talk to them about this sort of longer tradition of writing and that we still use manuscript culture at the same time that we're using digital culture, and that these are back and forth. And so these manuscripts, the Ethiopian tradition is really interesting for that even once printing takes over or once we have digital technology, there's still this really core tradition that goes back to a much older way of writing and communicating. So that's really cool.
Yeah. And what about the script?
So the script is really interesting. This is Gaya's script, which is it's a particular type of alphabet that was invented for Ethiopian writing, and it seems to be the only type of script in this family. So I'm really interested in it because it has a particular kind of style to it that looks very similar to some of the Star Wars manuscripts. It seems to be more of this sort of Eastern type of alphabet, what we might think of as something coming out of the Middle East or out of Africa. And we don't know the exact alphabet that they're using, or even if this is a kind of constructed language that they're using in these manuscripts that we see in the art book. But it's very striking, the similarities.
It makes me it's very blocky. Like that's what I think when I look at the Star Wars writing and then I look at Gia's, I think it's like blocky in the same way. And I haven't looked at the letters themselves to see if any of the letters are the same. I don't know, but it certainly has the same look. And I know when I first saw the page that they showed in the movie, I was like, oh my gosh, it reminds me of LJS 102. So yeah.
Yeah, and we'll see other types of script that are like this. It's very clearly not based on a kind of like Western or European writing tradition, which is really great and really interesting. And one of my interests is this sort of global Middle Ages and how many of the manuscripts we'll see here are not just from Western Europe, but across this tradition. And it looks like some of the inspiration for the Star Wars manuscripts wasn't just this Western tradition.